In this video, I'm going to go over some of the directional terminology used in anatomy and physiology. Directional terminology helps us describe the locations of organs and structures within the body. They quite often come in pairs, and these pairs of words are usually opposite directions. So the first set are superior and inferior. Sometimes superior we will replace that with words like cephalic or cranial, which mean pertaining to the head. But superior is an upper part of a structure or above something else. So looking at the example, your book gives the heart is superior to the liver. I think we know where our heart is. So if you locate your heart, our liver is in our abdomen, which is below the heart. So if the heart is above the liver, we can say the heart is superior to the liver. The opposite term to superior is inferior. Inferior means away from the head or below or a lower part of a structure. We often use caudal. Caudal means tail, so towards the tail would be caudal. So looking at the example, the stomach is inferior to your lungs. I think we know our lungs are in our chest, and I think we know our stomach is below that in our abdomen. So the stomach is inferior to the lungs. Now, these terms need to be studied, they need to be used. This is an example of learning a new language and learning new words, and the only way to properly learn that language is to practice these words. We're going to be doing that on the next slide. The next pair of terms include anterior and posterior. We can also use ventral and dorsal. In some cases you will see anterior, posterior. In other cases, we might use ventral and dorsal instead. Anterior means nearer to the front of the body, whereas posterior means towards the back of the body. The examples that your book gives, the sternum is anterior to the heart. So your sternum or breastbone protects your heart. In order to protect that heart, you have to be in front of the heart. So the sternum is anterior to the heart. In your throat or in your neck, you have two tubes, one for food, one for air. Your esophagus transports food down to your stomach, whereas your trachea transports air down to your lungs. Well, these two tubes are anterior and posterior to one another. The esophagus is the one in the back, so it is posterior to the trachea. The next group, medial, lateral, and intermediate. This has to do with the midline of the body. The midline is an imaginary vertical line that divides either the body or an organ into right and left sides. So if you drew a line right down the middle of your body, that would be the midline. Organs that are closer to that midline, we say are medial. So if you're nearer or closer to the midline, you are medial. The example given here is the ulna and radius. These bones are in your forearm. The ulna is more on your pinky side. Your radius is more on your thumb side. And when the body is positioned in what we call the anatomical position, your thumbs are pointing away from the body. So if you point your thumbs away from your body, the ulna, which is on the pinky side, is closer or nearer to the midline of the body. Therefore, your radius is going to be more lateral. Lateral means farther from the midline. So when we're comparing two organs, whichever one is farther from the midline of the body, we can say is lateral. This next example is your lungs to your heart. Again, I think we know where our heart and lungs are. If you think of where your lungs are, they are lateral to the heart. They are farther from the midline. Your heart lies on your midline. So your heart is medial. Your lungs are lateral. When we have two organs or if we have three organs really, and there's one in the middle of the other two, we call that intermediate. An example is your large intestine. Your large intestine has three primary regions, a transverse, an ascending, and descending. Well, the transverse colon is in between the ascending and descending colons. So the transverse colon is said to be intermediate to the ascending and descending colons. The next group of terms are ipsilateral and contralateral. Ipsilateral is on the same side. So when we have two organs that are on the same side of the body, they are ipsilateral. Contralateral is opposite sides. If we have two organs and they're on opposite sides, one on the right and one on the left, for example, we say those organs are contralateral. A couple examples, and on the next slide we have a picture to help us identify these. The gallbladder and ascending colon are ipsilateral. Both the gallbladder and ascending colon are on the right side of the body, so they are ipsilateral. The ascending and descending colon are on opposite sides of the body. The ascending is on the right, the descending is on your left, so they are contralateral. The next group of terms can typically be the trickiest, but proximal and distal. Proximal means nearer to an attachment site. We often use these when we're looking in the arms and legs because there's an attachment site. Your arm is attached at the shoulder, your leg is attached at the hip. So whatever is closest to that attachment, we call proximal. If you're farther from that attachment, you are distal or distant. You can think of distant. So let's look at some bones in your arm. The large bone in your upper part of your arm is called the humerus. That's the bone that helps form the shoulder joint. So the humerus is proximal to the radius. The radius is in your forearm, so it's farther from that attachment. So your humerus is proximal. That would make your radius distal to the humerus. What we're doing is comparing which bone is closest to the attachment, and that it would be your more proximal bone, the humerus. The example for distal, the phalanges, which are the little bones in your fingers, are distal to the carpals, which are the little bones in your wrist. So phalanges are distal to the carpals. Your phalanges are farther from the attachment. The next two, superficial and deep. Superficial means towards the surface of the body. Deep means away from the surface of the body. For example, your ribs are superficial to the lungs. Your ribs are closer to the surface than your lungs. The next example, the ribs are deep to the skin. Your skin is the most superficial organ in the body. There's nothing closer to the surface than skin. So pretty much everything is deep to your skin. So the ribs are deep to the skin of the chest and back. Okay, so those are an introduction to these terms. This slide is going to help us practice. Okay, these are fill in the blanks. We have a couple organs in each statement, and what we're looking for is the best answer to describe the location of those two organs. This drawing will help us do that because some of these organs we may not be familiar with. But we need to start learning where major organs of the body are. So as we go through these organs, if you don't know their location, it is very important for you to find them. The first statement, the urinary bladder is what to your small intestines? Your urinary bladder is located right here. Okay, it houses urine, it stores urine. Your small intestines are up here, all kind of packaged together there. So, if you think about the location, a good answer would be inferior. The urinary bladder is inferior to the small intestines. It is below or farther from the head than the small intestines. Okay, let's look at the next statement. The metacarpals are what to your phalanges? Well, let's find the metacarpals. The metacarpals are bones in your palm. Okay, so the metacarpals are in your hand. Phalanges are in your fingers. So looking at this comparison, and it's in an arm, so we often will be using proximal and distal when we're studying the location of structures in arms and legs. The metacarpals are closer to the origin being the shoulder. So your metacarpals are proximal to the phalanges. Your metacarpals are closer to the point of attachment. They are closer to the shoulder than phalanges. Okay, the next two, the gallbladder and liver. Here is the gallbladder. Notice it's a small little green sac that sits underneath your liver. The liver is this larger brown colored organ in your upper abdomen. So a good answer would be a word that suggests that the gallbladder is below the liver. But we don't use the word below, we use the word inferior. Gallbladder is inferior to the liver. What I'm going to do now is stop the video and let you try to answer the rest. And when the next video starts, the answers will be given. So I'd like to see how well you do. One final point. What we call the anatomical position is a standardized method of observing or imaging the body that follows precise and consistent anatomical reference. Basically what that means is we like to study the human body in this position. To describe this position, the person would be standing flat with their feet flat on the floor, and the arm is positioned here, where the thumb is pointing lateral to the body. So go ahead and try to answer the rest of them. Notice that this diagram helps you with these proximal, distal, inferior, superior, medial, and lateral. In the next video, we'll see how well you did.